And welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Caffeinated Jiu Jitsu. Today's episode, everyone, is one of those very special, memorable milestones in podcasting for me. My guest today is someone that I've spent my entire Jiu Jitsu journey listening to, either driving to work, stuck in traffic, or going home at night after getting smashed as a white belt in the early days on the mat. And there's a good chance that you've heard him too. Ryan Ford is one of the most recognizable voices in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He has spent several years interviewing some of the most influential figures in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's a host and creator of one of the first BJJ podcast, the Grappling Central podcast, and now is the voice behind the BJJ Fanatics podcast. But beyond the microphone, he is a black belt under the legendary UFC fighter Damian Maia. He has been featured in BJJ Magazine. He is the creator and producer of an awesome YouTube documentary, which I watched last night, Ryan. I hope we get to talk about that. But the Saint of Crackland, he's a proud father, and it is my absolute honor to welcome Ryan Ford to the show. Ryan, welcome.
Joe, thank you so much. What an introduction, buddy. I appreciate that. And first and foremost, man, I really do appreciate you listening to the show. I'm glad to hear that it helped you through the white belt phase and that you've been listening for a long time. If you're married, I apologize to your wife for having to hear my voice all the time if you're listening that frequently, but it does mean a lot that you tune in, buddy. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's something weird, and I hope it's not too weird. So when I write my introductions for the show, I hear kind of how you do your introductions, and it's kind of like I hear your voice when I'm giving my intros, man. I know that's a weird thing.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that, brother. Well, dude, I'm in the spirit of the show here. I'm caffeinated up. So here's an interesting fact about me, dude. I love everything about coffee except for the way it makes me feel. I love the smell of coffee. I love the taste of coffee. I like coffee culture. I think like cafes and things like that is cool. But if I drink coffee, I get jittery. Like I'm too naturally hyper as it is, I think. And I can't have coffee, but dude, what I can have is tea. I don't know if you've seen this before. Have you seen mate before? Have you seen these before?
No, I haven't. No.
So dude, this is something I've only seen. So in southern Brazil and in Argentina and Uruguay, they have this thing called mate. In Brazil, they call it chimarrón. And so it's basically green tea leaves that are ground up and put into this gourd, and it absorbs differently into your body than coffee does. It goes like through your liver rather than hitting your bloodstream. It processes more like food. So it's a more gentle caffeine. So I still get my spike of caffeine just without being off the wall and seeing colors and stuff. Or seeing sounds. So it's manageable, but I caffeinated myself up in spirit of the show.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I can't. So I have 5 boys, man.
Oh my God, you have 5 kids?
5, dude.
Jeez.
5 kids.
You got a squad.
All boys.
All boys.
I've had quieter days in downtown Baghdad. Dude. Like it's insane.
I can imagine.
So it used to be coffee and whiskey, but then you get older, you can't do that. Because your body will hate you.
Great.
But no, I have to stay caffeinated. But funny story, so have you ever heard of this coffee called Death Wish coffee?
Yes, I have. I've never had it.
Probably seen it on
that would
Instagram
probably kill
too.
me, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
All right. So I thought it was just a cool like bag and like graphics, and I think they're veteran on too. And I was like, hey, I'm going to grab me a bag, but I didn't pay attention to the caffeine count like the mgs or mls or whatever. So I was still trying. I was like, I can drink 3 cups a day. I'm going to use this. 1 cup is equal to 1.5 of the like max an adult should take in. I was drinking 3 of those, and I did that for 2 days. And man, I started like having these heart palpitations. I was like, what is going on?
Eventually you reach nirvana, I'm sure.
Dude,
you know?
I mean, but what a way to go though, right? from
Dude,
overdose or coffee.
The first time I ever came to Brazil, it was to propose to my wife. We were together for a while at that point. So I came down here to meet her family, and they had like a whole barbecue and a celebration. It was fun. But the first night, I'm there by myself. I didn't speak any Portuguese. This was 2012. I was a blue belt. And, I wake up in the morning, my wife's in the shower, we're in her mom's house and her mom's there. And so she's looking at me, I'm looking at her. There's a language barrier. And she goes, "Você quer café? Like, do you want coffee?" And I was like, "Café? Oh, coffee." And I didn't want to be rude. So I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I'll have some coffee." I didn't know coffee here is like cocaine grade. So she gives me like this little cup of coffee. I'm thinking, oh, okay, cool. It's a little cup. I should be fine. Dude, by the time my wife gets out of the shower, I'm sitting there sweating. I'm red and I'm like trembling. And she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I had some of that coffee your mom made." And she's like, "Oh my God, Mom, you can't give him that. He can't even drink Folgers. Like he can't have this." So I didn't sleep for the first 2 days I was here the first time. There's levels to, just like jujitsu, there's levels to coffee, bro. There's levels. And it sounds like the death wish thing that you took is up there, high brown belt, black belt level.
Oh yeah. I won't say it's a never again because I'm not a quitter, but it's definitely, I'm not going to be taking in 3 cups a day. Right.
Yeah.
No. Well, again, thanks for joining. But let's start out right as we do here in the podcast, and it's so cool to be talking to another podcaster. It's I want to get into your origin story, right? Like who you are, kind of away from the mic, and how obviously you got into jiu-jitsu, and you have some other training and martial arts background. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So originally my family's from the Chicago area. We moved to Atlanta when I was a kid. I was a very, and still am, high ADD, kind of high energy person. So as a kid, it was, times 10. So my family needed something for me to do throughout the day. They needed a way to burn some energy. And I was very influenced as a true 90s kid in martial arts because I was huge into Ninja Turtles. Professional wrestling was a big thing. I was like mandatory as a kid in the 90s. And then, we had things like, movies, Bloodsport, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter. So there was lots of things as a kid in the 90s that were related to martial arts that were in style. And so I was very attracted to martial arts early on. We started with Taekwondo when I was a kid. It's just what was available. Where in Georgia are you, by the way? Because it's a huge coincidence that we're both, that's where I grew up and that's where you are.
Yeah, so you may know, you may not, about 50 minutes outside of Atlanta, a small town called Brazelton, Georgia. And I grew up in Commerce.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
If you know where Atlanta is, you have an idea. You've at least heard of Brazelton before.
No, I know Brazelton. I know where that is. So I grew up in like East Roswell, kind of Norcross.
Yeah, that's the alliance I trained at with Rodrigo Maciel. Cool. They opened one in Roswell. Yeah.
Oh, cool, dude. Cool. Awesome. That's a newer location, isn't it?
It is. It's about 3 years old now. Yeah.
Sweet.
And when I got in there, they just made a year.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Alliance is part of my story too. So we'll get there in a second. So basically I grew up in East Roswell, kind of Norcross area. And at the time there was Taekwondo. There's a Taekwondo studio that wasn't far from where we were. And so that's where I started. Loved it, competed, had a lot of fun as a kid. And then through the funny thing is at the time, like we're talking 1994, 95-ish, there was a lot of the martial arts landscape in general was very different than it is now. MMA hadn't quite blown up globally yet. It was just the very beginning. And there was still very much the question of style versus style. Does a karate guy beat a judo guy? Does a boxer beat so there was not any like proving ground. So there was a lot of mystique and mysticism. Everyone knew someone that was apparently had some kind of ninja training that no one could verify. And like, you could go to literally like established schools and you have no idea who this guy is, where he came from, whether he's a snake oil salesman or whether he's a legitimate martial artist. And there wasn't a lot of ways to prove that. So, my point with that is there was a lot of navigating, that needed to be done on your own part as a martial artist in the early 90s, because we didn't have as much of a track record in martial arts that we do now. Now we know there's styles that are more martial arts and like spiritual kind of training. And then there's combat stuff. And then there's sports stuff. And there's a little bit less mystique out there.
It's better defined. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so basically, I started with Taekwondo, did that. And then one day next door to the Taekwondo dojo, I guess you'd call it, there was a video rental store. And for anyone that's, that was born after 2000, you probably don't know what VHS even is. So it's a VHS. They used to rent out VHS tapes, right? And as I said, as a kid, I was a huge professional wrestling fan. I was like just all in on pro wrestling. And my dad and I, after classes, used to, on the weekends, grab a movie and a professional wrestling pay-per-view tape to watch over the weekend. Well, one day I go in there and I see a different tape, and I was looking at it, and actually my dad found it and was looking at it. He said, "Hey, Ryan, look at this." He says, "I don't think this is pro wrestling. I think this is like real fighting. I don't think this." And then of course my 7-year-old, I'm like, "Well, wrestling's real. Hulk Hogan's he's a real fighter." My dad's like, "Oh, right. Yeah, my bad. Of course." He said, "I think these guys are using martial arts," is what I should have said. And so we rented it, and he goes up to the counter, and the guy at the desk looks at him and he goes, this is pretty violent. He looks at because he sees I'm 7 years old. My dad goes, "Oh, I don't know." And so I have to like go into salesman mode. Like, "Oh, Dad, don't worry. I rent Roddy Piper and Bret Hart had like blood all over them. And I was fine. I watched it before." So my dad was like, "All right, don't tell your mom. We'll watch this when she goes to bed." So we watch it at home that weekend. And my whole worldview, even as a little kid, was totally open because, I'd seen all the physiques and the characters of pro wrestlers. Now you're seeing like actual guys that are fighting. And there was a lot of characters in that early UFC, you had sumo wrestlers, you had like karate guys, you had guys in great shape, guys in not so great shape. There's like a guy, like a ninjutsu guy with a mullet and an AC/DC shirt. It's just like a wide variety.
The trucker's cab. Yeah.
Dude, he's just out there fighting. Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah. And then there was this guy, Hoist Gracie, and he was the skinniest guy. And that resonated with me because I was always real small for my age. I had a growth spurt later in life. But as a kid, I was always the smallest one in the class. I was skinny. And so I see Hoist Gracie, and he ironically looked just like the Dominican dude that worked at our post office locally that we really liked. I was like, "Hey, it looks like Domingo." And so he's just a normal looking guy. Like Hoist Gracie could have been like a substitute math teacher or something. And he's standing
like an accountant to me.
Yeah, like an accountant. Yeah, it's a perfect. Yeah, exactly. And so we're thinking, "Oh, well, this guy's going to get killed, man. Let me look at all these other guys and look at this guy." And then all of a sudden, he uses jujitsu, and it's like this style erases other styles. Like, because I hadn't seen it before. I'd seen wrestlers and stuff like amateur freestyle wrestlers, but I hadn't seen them fighting against people trying to punch and kick them. And so when you see a grappler bring a striker to the ground, it's like, oh my God, this is like a crocodile dragging a larger animal into water, and now there's nothing this thing can do because it can't swim. And so it was really eye-opening. And I told my dad right away, I'm like, "Man, I want to learn jujitsu." So my dad breaks out the yellow pages, because obviously before Google and all that. So he's flipping through the yellow pages. Like, dude, there's nothing in Georgia that I can find jujitsu. I think Jacare from Alliance, head of Alliance, he came to Miami, I think in 95. And then a year later moved up and opened up Alliance HQ in Atlanta, but that was till 96. So we're talking still 1994. I think I was in 4th grade at this time. So there was no jiu-jitsu for the other 2 years. I didn't find out that jiu-jitsu was even in Atlanta until another, 8 years after that. So eventually I quit Taekwondo at about 12 years old, started wrestling in middle school. Only did that for about a season and then quit. One of my greatest regrets in life. My excuse was lame too. I just wanted to play with my friends after school. I didn't want to go to the wrestling room. Looking back, God, I wish I stayed in wrestling. But I just quit wrestling. My dad was kind of frustrated with me because I'd quit Taekwondo, then I quit wrestling. And one day I'm hanging out in the apartment complex, and we had this bulletin thing on the mailboxes, and there was a little rip off where you rip off the phone numbers and stuff. And there was an alligator logo wearing a gi. And it said Brazilian Master Brazil. Before Jacare changed the name to Alliance, it was Master Jiu-Jitsu. And so it said Master Jiu-Jitsu. And I was like, "Oh my God, that's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's the thing Hoist Gracie does." So you're supposed to tear a little number. I took the whole flyer and like ran home with it. And I showed my dad. I'm like, "Dad, look, there's jiu-jitsu here." And he's like, "Nah." He said, you just quit Taekwondo and wrestling back to back. I'm not going to pay for you to quit something else." So he was pissed at me, rightfully so. And so I didn't start. I would have been about 13 at that point, 13 or 14 at that point. And didn't start jiu-jitsu officially until I was about 21. It was later in life. I started, 2005 was my first class. And that's kind of what led me to training. So,
yeah. I think the first time I heard about it, I didn't start to actual start until I was 42,
Oh,
and
cool.
so way later in life.
Yeah.
But I heard about it, in my probably in my 20s, maybe earlier mid 20s, when I was in the military. The Army combatives, uh, I guess the core of it, it has some jujitsu, right? Like they
Yeah.
teach mount escape, the arm trap roll, all of that, right? So
Yeah.
that's the first time I kind of heard about it, and then a lot of the so I my role in the military at the time was combat service support. So I supported at Fort Bragg a lot of uh, the SF groups and the teams and
Oh,
stuff,
that's
and
awesome,
some of
man.
those guys did it. But
That's great. I
I didn't
appreciate your
really.
service, by the way, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. But like super important question here, man. When you were a kid, did you have the wrestling ring and the rubber?
Oh, dude, I had it
Dude,
all.
I had them all. I had the cage, man.
I still have. So here's the funny. It's still in my parents' attic somewhere, and my son,
that's
who's
vintage,
now,
man.
bro, I've been passing this down. I've been totally brainwashing my kids into like vintage wrestling. So like they have no idea who like these new wrestlers are. They know Macho Man, they know Hulk Hogan, they know Ultimate Warrior, Sergeant Slaughter. It's
Jake
just
the Snake. Remember Jake the
dude,
Snake?
of course,
Dude?
Jake the Snake, another Georgia guy. No, so it's cool because I've been able to pass that with my kids. And back then it was very PG and kind of cartoonish almost. So it's not like it didn't get into the attitude era yet, which I with my kids being as young as they are, they're only 4 and 6, but they love it, dude. And I told my kids just now, we're coming to the States. We come to the States every year for Christmas to stay with my parents. And I just told my son that I actually have like a few boxes of wrestling stuff. So he's just counting down the days. He can't wait to see all the action.
It's going to be like a second, early Christmas, right?
Like 2 Christmases in one. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly,
yeah, I might not even shop for gifts this year. I'm just going to like hand them these boxes, yeah, keep it on a budget, right?
God, those things were so like cool. I don't even know, man. I don't even know how many. Whole toy chest full of them.
Oh yeah.
But let's stay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say. Plus, you had WWF and then you had WCW. So there was two different branches to go into and follow as well. So you mentioned your time doing combatives. I don't know if you know first class Sergeant First Class Matt Larson. He's the one that designed the combatives program. Did you know he's a black belt under Jacare?
I didn't know that. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I know the name, obviously, from I was level 1. I didn't go to level 2 because I on one of my trips to Iraq, I got injured and I had to take more of a desk job. So I got into recruiting my profession. But yeah, I've heard the name. I didn't know he was a black belt under Jacare.
He is. In fact, when I actually interviewed him on the podcast years ago. Very interesting guy. He was actually working alongside Jacare on a lot of the combative stuff. One of my best friends is actually a sergeant in the Ranger group, and he was down at Benning for a long time, and I think he's moved off into doing something else now. But he was showing me his hand-to-hand combat book that they have. I'm like, dude, this is all jujitsu. It's like 90% jujitsu. And then I realized later, it's like, oh, that's because one of Jacare's black belts is the guy that created the whole thing. Then McMap, the Marines version, is all based off of that too. And he was actually Marine also. So yeah, it's interesting how it all came kind of from the same tree. And then locally for us being Atlanta guys,
Yeah, it is. And thinking back now to the stuff we went over in, level 1, and now knowing like at least the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu, like the arm bars in there, the triangle chokes in there, the mount escape. So like a lot of and it's like you see, and I have the manual still, and you can go back in and see, right? Obviously they're not in geese, but they're using like the LBE and the collars and stuff for it's just cool, man.
It is.
No, I appreciate you sharing that story. I want to talk a little bit, if you're okay with it, kind of talk a little bit here about kind of podcasting. I know there's some areas that you want to talk about as well, things that are going on kind of new with you and in your life. But really want to start here with the Grappling Central podcast. And I wish I was doing jiu-jitsu back then, but what did the landscape look like when you started the Grappling Central podcast? And I think it was around, was it 2014 or 15? I think I can't. Yeah, like
2015,
I mean that's.
yeah.
Were there any jiu-jitsu podcast out at that time?
There wasn't a lot, but there was. So the original jiu-jitsu guy who deserves lots of shout out and praise, he's actually no longer with us, unfortunately. His name was Paul Moran, and Paul Moran had a show called On the Mat Podcast. And a really good guy. He passed away several years ago, but he had I think he was the very first. He was like the OG jiu-jitsu podcast guy. And then there was a few others out there. There was a few others that they were more kind of in the realm of MMA and jiu-jitsu, or just MMA. And there were some other jiu-jitsu shows. What gave me the idea was that as I was coming up with the idea to start a podcast, which is an interesting story within itself, I noticed that there weren't a lot of people doing long form interviewing, like one-on-one guests, just specifically one-on-one guests. It was usually like a host and a co-host, or a group of guys talking about jiu-jitsu. Occasionally they'd have guests in, but I thought, I as a young guy, I always enjoyed things like Charlie Rose and Larry King, like one-on-one interviews. I always found those to be kind of interesting. And I thought, man, that would be kind of cool to see someone talking to bigger names in jiu-jitsu and picking their brains and hearing their stories. Because we all know these like legends of the sport and stuff, but you don't know a whole lot about them as people and where they came from and how they tick. So it was an idea that I had initially. It was just that, yeah, that would be a cool thing to have, like just specifically a long form interview with one host, one guest, and do it that way. And it ended up being a pretty great formula. It worked really well for the last decade. So, but as far as how the show started, so I'll actually go back a little further back in my past because it is relevant. So growing up, both jiu-jitsu and the podcast came into my life at really the perfect time. Jiu-jitsu, I say I wish I found jiu-jitsu sooner in life, but as I reflect back, I'm actually glad I didn't find it sooner. Like when my dad said, "I'm not signing you up because you just quit wrestling," I'm actually glad that happened, because I probably would have quit jiu-jitsu. As a young guy, I was not disciplined. I was not focused. I was all over the place. I was also, candidly speaking, I was kind of a troubled kid. I was a very angry kid growing up, and I was a little lost. I didn't have any direction. Took some tours of the juvenile justice system and spent a little time in a boys' home, and ended up, having trouble in school and stuff. And so I was very aimless. I ended up dropping out of high school eventually. And basically due to that, I bounced from job to job. I would just do various warehouse jobs. I ended up working security at bars and nightclubs and stuff, doing like bouncing work in my earlier 20s, and really just didn't have any direction or plan or anything for myself. And I found the gym that I eventually signed up at to learn jiu-jitsu. The timing was perfect because I more than ever at that point in my life needed something to pull me on a better trajectory. And one of the cool things that through jiu-jitsu is you can walk into any mat and there's like cops, lawyers, ex-cons, doctors, college students. It's a mixture of kind of everybody. And everyone gets along and everyone has respect for each other. And it's a place where there is a true meritocracy, where it doesn't really matter what your education level is. It doesn't matter what your financial success has been in life. We're all equal. And what matters really is your abilities on the mats and how you are as a teammate. And so that was cool to have, because there's no other place in the world at that point in my life where I would have been anything besides the bottom rung and the entry level guy, kind of, So the reason I mention that is that jiu-jitsu gave me a kind of a guiding star to follow, and it gave me healthier people to be around. I started shedding some of my bad habits I had. I started, cutting ties with social connections I had that maybe weren't benefiting me very well, that definitely weren't benefiting me very well. And it's maybe a healthier person. And I think that took me in a direction where I was kind of like, okay, well, maybe I should think about being better in a career sense as well. So I started, I went back to college, went to tech school, started straightening myself out a little bit. When I first showed up in jiu-jitsu, I was and still am big into like punk rock and the hardcore scene and stuff. And so when I showed up, I was, Mohawk, I was a total knucklehead. In fact, that's a funny story. So when I first got to jiu-jitsu, there was a girl. I don't know if you've heard this name before, but her name was Mary Ellen Kano. And she was like the star female MMA fighter in Georgia at the time. She was like, this is right before Ronda Rousey and like the women's division of the UFC was even a thing. Had it been a thing, she would have for sure been in the UFC and everyone would have known her. She was phenomenal. But at the time, women's MMA hadn't quite blossomed yet. And she was part of the team. She was 125, 130 pounds, purple belt, super technical. And they had this thing at the academy that I didn't know about at the time, but it's basically the Mary Ellen test. And what they would do is they'd bring in someone that looks like a knucklehead, like I was, and they would have you roll with her. And if your ego could take it, then you were cool and you were welcome back. So they put me with her. And at the time I was like 210 pounds, something like that. She's 130. I'm thinking, dude, what do they put me with her for? Like, this is, you know what I mean? Like, this is, shouldn't they be putting me with like a dude my size or whatever? Bro, she was like a rabid squirrel. I could not hold on to her. I couldn't stop her. There was nothing I could do. Even if I was using my strength and my weight and everything, she'd slip out, take my back, choke me just over and over. And afterwards, so apparently what happens, most people that happens to, if they're a knucklehead, you don't see them again. That's their last time they show up, they're gone. All I could do was sit there afterward being like, I have to learn this. Dude, this is amazing. I have to learn how to do this. Is incredible. And that's what really hooked me into jiu-jitsu, because I was really looking not for jiu-jitsu at the time. I was interested in getting into MMA. Yeah. So I was pursuing to learn MMA. It was that experience that made me say, okay, hang on, MMA can pause. I'm going to do this. This is what I want to focus on first. So jiu-jitsu really locked me in, and that's what took me on a healthier direction in life. Now that takes me to the career thing and the podcast. So I bounced from job to job. My goal as a blue belt eventually was that, hey, I want to own my own school. I want to become a black belt, open an academy. That would be a cool job. Don't have to work in warehouses anymore or throw drunks out of bars. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, but what happened over time is, I got a job working in an office doing what's called fiber optic drafting, which sounds fancy. I'm basically drawing lines on Google Maps to show Comcast where to install fiber optic cable. Yeah. So it's really, really, as you can imagine, just like after a week of that, you're just like, oh my God, your brain's just melting. And so I exhausted my music playlist. And I finally said to my buddy in the cubicle next to me, I'm like, dude, how do you do this without blowing your head off? And he goes, I listen to I listen to podcasts. And I was like, what's a podcast? He's like, oh, it's like radio, but it's on the internet. It's like, oh, okay. So that's how I discovered what a podcast even was. And so that's when I started exploring jiu-jitsu stuff. So like, well, okay, yeah, there's the On the Mat podcast, but it doesn't look like they're adding new episodes anymore. And there's a couple others, but man, there's not any where they're like doing one-on-one long form interviews. That would be kind of a cool thing. About 6 months after that, this company I was working for went under. And I had been there literally 2 days within the range to get a severance package. So they gave me, so I was like, barely. Yeah. Like they almost didn't want to give it to me. And I'm like, no. Yeah. So they gave me the severance package, which was good for about 3 months of rent. And I told my wife, we were newly married at the time. I said, look, babe, I have gone from one soul sucking job to another in the last 5 years. Can I just take like a couple months to regroup and just figure out what I want to do? I don't know. I don't know what I want to do exactly, but I want to do a kind of a passion project. I need like a sabbatical. I need like a couple months. Is it cool if I use this severance package, just pay a couple months rent? The bills will be covered by both of us by that money, and you're working. And then I swear to God, I'll go find a job in just a couple months. I just need like 60 days to just kind of take a breather. She goes, you got 60 days. so during that time, I started the podcast. I got a hold of whatever equipment I could afford at the time and put it all together. And then through just years of training at that point, I'd been training for, God, at that point, about 8 or 9 years. I just seemed to know people that knew people that could put me in touch with someone to interview. So my first handful of guests were pretty impressive. I mean, I had like Hoist Gracie and Bernardo Faria, and wow. My first episode was with Dan Severn from the UFC. That's a very funny
As
story.
Your very first guest,
bro. Jeez. That's remind me to come put a pin in that one. So that's a funny story. But yeah, I had like a pretty decent lineup for the first batch, and then I threw it out there, and I just thought, okay, look, this is just something I want to put out there, and if it takes off and becomes something cool I can do on the side, then great. And then it really took off. Like within the first year, it became the number 1 ranked jiu-jitsu podcast on Apple Podcasts, and stayed that way ever since, pretty much. And yeah, I was still working a side gig for the first couple of years. I wasn't making any money at all with it. And then I started collecting sponsors eventually, and the rest is history. So it's, yeah, but there's many days where like I was working as an electrical assistant with a friend of mine, installing security lights and down in the south side of the city. So I come home like covered. Do you keep the show clean, or can we swear? Or Okay. Covered in bird shit, covered in like just because I'm up on a gutter and on a ladder. And so I'd rush home still covered in crap and like interview Hodger Gracie. I'm just sitting there like, he has no idea because it came out before video. I was just doing audio. But I'm like, dude, I'm covered in bird crap and interviewing Hodger Gracie. But that's how it went for the first couple of years. And yeah, it just continued to grow, man. And it became my full-time thing after only a couple of years. So.
Yeah, it's funny hearing you talk about these early days, because this is all the things that I'm going through, right? In the sense of, really actively, probably about a year and a half here on Caffeinated Jiu Jitsu. I had a podcast before, but it was more focused on like my profession and recruiting. It did really well, and that's where I fell in love with podcasting. But
nice.
Yeah, man, it's just crazy. And I'm unemployed right now, so I got laid off back in April. So I'm going through this whole job search thing, and then like I wish the job search was going as well as the podcast. Like I got an email the other day from Larry Shaley, and I didn't know who that was, but I guess he's the CEO and president of the new Mach 5. I think Higan Machado. I think.
Yeah, Higan Machado.
Yeah, they're launching something coming up, and they want to come on the podcast. So it's just awesome. And then there's been a shift in where Caffeinated Jiu Jitsu is now to where it started. Because I just started it because I was a white belt and confused and overwhelmed, and I wanted a place for, those of us of white belt stature or early in our jiu jitsu journey to kind of come together and talk about things. But what happened was, it picked up some steam, and now it's more focused on exactly the things we're talking about, like the transformation of jiu-jitsu and it more of a broader kind of martial arts, if that makes any sense. But it's been exciting, and I'll tell you, I don't think people understand the power of podcasting and conversation and how important it is, not just in jiu-jitsu, but any type of community, or regardless of what it is. So,
absolutely.
No. Thanks for sharing that. What I'd like to do is kind of before we move on to some other topics, is understand. This is selfishly understand how the move happened between, the Grappling Central podcast and BJJ Fanatics. And, also one thing I would love to learn, again, this is selfish. I hope the listeners like it, but I'm going to be a little selfish here. Like what did you have to kind of change about maybe yourself and your approach or your perspective, even if anything, as you moved into now, this big name and things like that? Does that make sense?
No, great question, man. So basically where I was leaving off before is that I was not making any money with it for the first couple of years, and then it slowly started picking up sponsors. Well, one of those sponsors over time ended up being my biggest one ever. It's BJJ Fanatics. And I guess Bernardo had been listening to the show for a while, which meant a lot to me, and was interested in working with me. And so they were basically just a sponsor on Grappling Central for several years, ran commercials, things like that. And then in 2021, they reached out and said, "Hey man, you want to fly up to Boston and talk to us? We want to talk." And I was like, okay. So I went up there, and basically they wanted to do a deal where it's like, hey, we just want to, do an exclusive deal where we're brand the show, keep the show as is, just brand it as with our name, and we're the only sponsor, we're the only name on it, and then just keep doing your thing as is. We just want to do like an exclusive thing. I was like, dude, yeah, great. Like that means I don't have to make any cold calls to sell advertising or anything. Like, so it takes all the work off my hands. And so I was thrilled, and it's been outstanding. I mean, Bernardo and Michael are two of just the best guys, and they do a lot for jiu-jitsu. There's so much that the guys at BJJ Fanatics do for the community of jiu-jitsu that most of the community has no idea about. So they've really helped keep this community afloat in a lot of ways and provided lots of opportunity for a lot of people. But anyway, that's basically how that all came together. They were my sponsor. They were just a normal sponsor on the show. Then they became like kind of the exclusive sponsor, and we kind of branded the show and everything. And so, nothing really changed, because you asked if I had to change anything about myself or the way I do the show. Nothing changed. I mean, they've really given me like complete, like, hey, like, dude, it's your thing. Just put our banner on it and just keep doing it. And I'm like, okay. So it's the same show it's always been, same formula, just with different introduction and a different name on the show, so it's been super cool. It's been super cool. And that's pretty much how that all went. I had a few other sponsors at the time of that deal, who I also really appreciated. One of them was AK Athletics. They make mats. They're out of Ohio. They make wrestling and training mats. Eat Clean Bro was a food prep service out of New Jersey that is now also in Atlanta. I think they got billboards all over Atlanta now. And there's been another Senso Geese. There was a lot of jiu-jitsu and slightly adjacent, like nutrition, protein type stuff that was also working with me. But but nothing really changed that much as far as the structure or how I present the show. The mission for the show has always been the same thing. You mentioned that you started yours as a white belt, wanting to have a place where white belts can connect. My thought going into the podcast was always, what would white belt Ryan what questions would he want to hear? What would he want answers to? What kind of stories would he be interested in? And that was always my focus of the show, was to create a place, a library of knowledge and insight from people who are much more accomplished at this than I am. So,
I enjoyed the first several episodes that kind of had that theme. And it's really interesting to hear that, going into a one of your sponsors turning into kind of like your full-time gig, like they didn't come in and try to control your content, and you have to do a plug every fight. Like I listen a lot to podcasts, and Theo, this weekend with Theo Vaughn is one of my favorites, man. I love that guy.
He's one of my favorites too.
But he does like 5 plugs of advertisements every time. And I think again, BJJ Fanatics is the podcast I listen to the most. And if I had to listen to you do ads every 12 minutes, I would probably be a little frustrated.
I tried to, I did put a limit, because there was a point where I had like 5 sponsors at a time. And I was even telling my wife, I'm like, oh man, this is heavy. This is getting heavy. I think for a lot of people, this is going to be kind of, so I tried to do quick, 10, 15 seconds in the beginning, 30 seconds in the middle, 30 seconds to a minute in the middle. But then I eventually got to the point where it's like, hey, when I had 5 and 2 fell off, I'm like, look, I'm not going to try to add any more. Let's just keep these 3. Let's keep 3 at a time. The only exception I made to that was one of my first sponsors was Leao Optics, the sunglass company out of California. Great guy that runs that. Thing's named Lionel. He was one of my very first sponsors back when I was like almost having to shut down, because I just wasn't. It was just not growing after a couple of years. It was growing, but I wasn't making any money, and it was kind of becoming a strain. He came in and was like, "Yeah, man, I'll buy advertising." And so he came in, and his price basically never changed. No matter how big the show got, I kept him at the same rate as I did in 2016 or 2017. And anytime that he wanted to come back and advertise, even if there was 3, I'd let him jump on as a 4th, because loyalty. So, but I tried to always keep it a limit to 3, because otherwise it gets a little heavy after that.
Yeah, and this is an area that's new to me that I'm starting to get in, because I have 2 affiliate sponsors, right? That
cool.
So Rubber Bones, Rash Guards, which I love.
Yeah, dude.
We're doing, Maria and I are doing, who owns Rubber Bones, we're doing a collab, and we're about to probably next week launch pre-orders for the Caffeinated Jiu-Jitsu Rubber Bones t-shirts. So she's done some amazing artwork. I'm excited for that. And then also Grapple or Die, just kind of partnered with them. But as far as paid sponsors, that's where I'm kind of at in the journey and figuring out and navigating that. It's coffee shops are reaching out to me, which is kind of cool. Okay. Like I think it's a Caffeinated, right?
Yeah, dude.
Atlanta coffee shops had reached out. But anyway, no,
Yes, find a coffee shop that's near a big school, and then just have some kind of kind of coupon code or something with them, where if a jiu-jitsu guy comes in, they give you some kind of kickback or something.
Yeah, well, there's a coffee shop where the owner actually trains.
Oh,
Purple
perfect.
Belt,
There you go.
and he's got a series up in Gwinnett. So
nice.
I just haven't had the time to kind of develop that out, but that's on the priority list.
That's been an interesting thing that happens with me too with the podcast. I get messages a lot from people with just general podcasting questions. Mm-hmm. And I always kind of have to say the same thing, because I feel like I've been, it's partially luck, it's partially timing. And then I think the rest is, I do have to credit myself that I think I've stayed with a consistent formula that's worked well. But the luck part of things is that the timing in which I started the show, I've been able to build up a big library and a big following. That's obviously the number one thing you have to do to get advertisers to take it seriously, to pay for it. And even then, making money in podcasting, if you're getting into podcasting to have a career and make money, I tell people, dude, you should just do something else. I mean, honestly, the odds. I mean, I'm not saying don't quit. I'm not saying quit. I'm not saying don't try. I'm saying if you really enjoy this, then dude, do it to the fullest of your potential. And I pray for you that it goes off and you become rich, and that's awesome. But the truth is, there's a group out there called what are they called? The Edison Institute. Edison Institute, I think they're called. And they do research on media and trends and things like that. Every year they have like a report that comes out that talks about listener behavior, consumer behavior, things like that. Well, with podcasting, the statistic is 90% or something like that of podcasts. It's some crazy number, like 90% won't make it past 7 episodes. So if you make it past 7 episodes, you're ahead of like 90% of people who's ever started a podcast.
Yeah.
Of those 10% remaining people, it's something like 90% again won't make any money ever. And then of this sliver that's inside that, the people that make money, there's obviously a spectrum from you can pay your cell phone bill doing this to Joe Rogan. Right. Yeah. So it's everything,
making 100K
and kind of everything in and needless to say, Joe Rogan is at like the 1% of the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. Right. And so I always tell people, if you're doing this because you think you're going to replace a job, or this is going to be dude, you're doing, just don't even, number one, your motives are not in the right place. Number two, the statistics, it would be the same as if I told a kid in middle school, dude, try to be in the NBA. It's like, okay, well, getting into the NBA, that's like 1% of kids in the world, in the country that end up being able to get close. And so, with that said, there are avenues, there are ways to do this. I think that you should be passion and mission driven more than anything. If you, for example, in your shoes, you and I, we're both the same. We love talking about jiu-jitsu. We're very passionate about jiu-jitsu. We like stories. We like insights and learning and stuff. Well, then dude, that makes this easy. If I wasn't making a penny, this is something I could just do on Saturdays because I like it, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the first question I often get is like, man, how do I make money? And it's like, dude, that I'm not even going to go there. I'd rather give you the insight on how to set up technically so that you sound and look as best as you can with your equipment, interviewing tactics, interviewing techniques rather, things like that. But when it comes to making money, like, dude, it's tough. It's a tough racket. Yeah. And I got lucky that number one, I was able to do it for as long as I did. The timing of when my show started was important. The connections I was able to make were important. And then also, I got lucky with Fanatics being a sponsor and then, doing an exclusive deal with me for as long as they have. So, yeah, I guess that my point is I do get questions about that a lot, that people email me, message and email me asking for pointers. And usually if it starts with, how do I make this my job? It's like, dude, I don't want to burst your bubble. I really don't. I want you to be able to do this for a living. Like, that would be awesome. I'd be happy for you. It's just that I would also hate the puffy full of smoke and, tell you that it's easy, because it's not. It's a very small fraction of people that, that make money doing this. So
yeah, and that's a truthful statement from me for sure, because I think that may have been on the list of questions that I even sent you when we first connected, because that's how we connected, right? I was like, I had all these questions about podcasting.
That's right. I was
like, hey, but money, I think for me is the furthest I mean, obviously, I mean, you're not going to take care of 5 kids on a podcast, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Income.
They can't just send you geese and samples of protein powder and,
and
support
pay
your
my
kids.
bills with that. But I mean, obviously, I would love to do this full time, but it's a passion, and I think if you do something that starts as a passion and it turns into your career, I mean, it can. You have to be careful with that because then you start to dislike it a lot. I think, or a little, or at least enough for it to be an annoyance. So. It's awesome hearing you share how to make sure to put things in perspective. One of my good friends who I met at my first competition, I competed against him and he won and we became friends. David McWilliams, he hosts he just created a BJJ Charleston podcast, and
cool.
He's looking forward to listening to this episode because he sent me a list of questions. Hey, ask him this, ask him that. So, but one of the things he was talking about was sponsorship. So thank you so much for taking time and spending on that. And I know we've spent time here talking about podcasting, which is something obviously we're going to talk about, but let's talk about some other topics, some topics that you and I discussed that you wanted to talk about. Now you shared with me about rediscovering jiu-jitsu as a fighting art.
Yeah.
Right. What do you mean by that? Right. Like, talk me through that and kind of what's going on with that in your life. Right
Sure. Yeah. So basically what I've found, I think that, and this is going to be true for everyone that sticks around in jiu-jitsu long enough, you're going to find that your why for training changes over time. When you're young and single and full of piss and vinegar, you probably want to be a competitor, or maybe you want to be an MMA fighter or whatever. That can change over time. Your purposes for why you're training and what scratches the itch, so to speak, can change for why you show up to jiu-jitsu. And I think I kind of went through the full gamut of it. I think that I initially came in with an interest in MMA. That changed more to an interest in the sport of jiu-jitsu. I competed a lot as a white, blue, and purple belt. And then that sort of over time, as the podcast took off and as I started a family, and I'm now 41. So I'm in the over 40 crowd now. My focus has changed again now to being kind of back to the, I'm really fascinated by the idea of jiu-jitsu being a fighting system again, which is initially what attracted people in the first place. And back in the day, it was they saw Hoist Gracie do his thing. And that was what appealed to a lot of people. So I've spent almost 20 years training now. Got my black belt under Damian a few years ago. Bounced around a lot. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, I think that my focus is now, it went from being real focused on MMA application to then being real focused to the sport of jiu-jitsu, which I think, if I'm being real, the sport of jiu-jitsu and jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu, as I call it, is probably the deepest depths, in my opinion, of jiu-jitsu, because the variables just multiply massively. It's when we get into gi and no-gi applications and the variables that change depending on whether you're in a gi or not. The tactics and the strategies and the positions that only really happen in jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu situations. Like if you're in a street fight or something, or in a self-defense situation, you probably don't have to worry about the guy pulling De La Hiva guard on you and having to deconstruct De La Hiva and then defend the X guard when he switches from De La Hiva to X guard. So there is a deeper, more human chess vibe to jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu. Whether you want to call that the sport of jiu-jitsu or whether you're just training in the academy often and focused exclusively on using your jiu-jitsu against other people's jiu-jitsu. I did that for a long time. I started boxing again as an adult. I hadn't boxed since I was in high school, and found jiu-jitsu in my early 20s, and then kind of just went away from everything else and just kind of went all in on that. But I'm now back to boxing again on a weekly basis. And it's brought me kind of back to like the idea of using striking to get a clinch, to get a takedown, to then dealing with someone on the ground trying to punch and fight and get away. It's kind of I don't know. I'm back into this kind of enjoying the idea of jiu-jitsu being for fighting and for combat. And I feel like that's something that a lot of the jiu-jitsu community has grown away from. And again, I get it because jujitsu versus jujitsu is just, it's badass. It's awesome. It's this really deep ocean of possibilities and things to learn and things to improve. And but yeah, I'm kind of in that phase right now where I'm back towards kind of the fighting side of things. I'm trying to explore a little bit more how to apply jujitsu, I guess, in a self-defense application more. But yeah, I think that happens. I think that's natural. I think as people go through especially over time, as you get older and as your priorities change, your why and what excites you changes as well. So if you talk to me in a year from now, I'll probably be right back to doing, X guard again and, whatever else. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really, really cool to hear you talk through that. Do you think, and again, this isn't, well, let me back up a little bit. So you and I've trained at different areas and different times in our journey. I got my blue belt through Alliance, and then now I'm full circle back with here in Brazelton training at the place that I started, right? Which is Iron Wolf Academy. It's a kind of
with Caleb.
Oh, you know Caleb?
Oh, dude, Caleb's my boy. I've known Caleb for years. That's awesome.
What?
Is that where you train now?
Yeah, that's where I started. Dude, that was a 2-strike white belt.
Dude, yeah. Tell Caleb I said, hey, no, Caleb's awesome, dude. Me and my brother, my brother's Chris Ford. He's a black belt too under Paul Creighton. And Caleb and Chris go way back. I actually know Caleb through my brother. So.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I love Caleb. But
cool. What a coincidence. Awesome.
Yeah, I still remember my first day or first night on the mat, and we learned X guard. Can you imagine being a white belt or not a white belt, but your trial class?
Yeah, you're still wearing the leather belt when you come in. Yeah, you're wearing your normal pants. Yeah.
Oh man, I'll tell you about love. He's built such a great community there, and actually, he's getting ready to build new location, and that's
no
exciting.
way.
Yeah, dude,
no way. Dude.
He's outgrown it, man.
That's great. He deserves every bit of it.
Oh,
do you know the rash guard you guys have, that maroon one with the wolf and the it's like silver? My wife designed that. She's the graphic designer that made that.
Are you serious?
Yeah. My wife
cool.
did. My wife's a graphic designer. She's the one that did all the faces for Grappling Central. Like, you remember the animated faces, like the comic book style characters of every guest. She did that. Cool. And then she also designed Caleb's Iron Wolf. She's done a lot of work in the jiu-jitsu world for graphic design and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm working with him. I'm not going to put too much of this out, but on a kind of a syndicate program, and there's some new artwork going out. But that's awesome, man. That is small world, small jiu-jitsu world.
Yeah, the jiu-jitsu world's even smaller. Yeah.
Well, so to the question, and I'm glad I remembered the actual question I had. Do you think academies are paying? And this is a broad, right, throughout jiu-jitsu.
Sure. Yeah.
Paying attention to if they're drifting away from the self-defense part of jiu-jitsu and focusing more on the sport. I mean, because sometimes it feels like it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Gracie gyms, they solely focus on self-defense. I think that's something they stayed with throughout the years.
Yes.
But as a whole, like, what are your thoughts? Is that kind of a clear question?
This is a great question because it goes in a couple different directions, and it's something I have opinions on all different directions. So
good, let's hear it.
The initial question, the first slice, I'll call it the first slice of the question, is jiu-jitsu in general floating away from self-defense? I would say without a doubt, yes. I think that a lot of schools out there are still focusing on self-defense, and a lot of schools still offer both. But I think in general, the popularity of jiu-jitsu and the sport has caused it to go into more of a sportive direction, which in my opinion is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I think it's really a good thing. I think that the growth of the sport of jiu-jitsu has not only brought more people in, it's allowed the level of jiu-jitsu to increase higher and higher. Like, dude, when I look now at 16-year-old blue belts rolling, I just think, like, dude, these kids would have murdered me when I was a blue belt. Like, their levels it's not even the same thing. They would have killed me. I feel like the level, the tides have risen so much in jiu-jitsu as a result of greater emphasis on jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu, problem solving and strategizing. As one trend comes up, the new trend has to be taking that one out and dealing with it. And now the next one piles on, and the level evolution keeps occurring. So it's been a good thing, but yes, I do think it's pulling away from the self-defense aspect, which I think is also a really important thing not to lose. Look, I've always been someone that is a fan of the entire tree of jiu-jitsu. I don't want to leave out any branches. I do gi, I do no gi, I do self-defense jiu-jitsu, I do sport jiu-jitsu. I love including wrestling and judo. That's why I called my podcast the Grappling Central Podcast, not the Jiu-Jitsu Central Podcast, because I wanted to include judo and wrestling and sambo, and I even had sumo wrestlers on. I love grappling, and I think it all fits together. And I don't like this idea of being on one branch of the tree saying this is the best branch. I don't agree with that. But if you're going to be a master of jiu-jitsu, man, you don't want to be an expert home builder that doesn't know how to prepare wiring for the electrician. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to not know how a roof is applied and things like that. So you want to know it all. You can have your specialty and your focus and your passion, but you should know it all, especially if you're teaching it. And that brings me to the self-defense side. I think that there's two routes that are kind of shameful that can happen. One is if you're an exclusively jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu focused person and you train and all that. In my opinion, your odds of being able to protect yourself on the street are significantly higher than your average guy on the street that knows nothing, obviously. But man, it would be a shame if someone started throwing punches at you while you're out with your girlfriend at a bar or something, and you don't know how to clinch and cover and do a proper takedown on the sidewalk or on the ground that doesn't hurt yourself. And you end up getting your ass kicked when you're a jiu-jitsu guy. That would be pretty shameful. Same thing goes if you're an exclusive self-defense jiu-jitsu guy and you walk into a gym and you don't know how to pass a daily Hiva guard because you've never seen it or you don't practice it. It's like, dude, come on, man. Like, learn jiu-jitsu, man. Jiu-jitsu is all of this. You can have your focus and your thing that, as I said, scratches your itch. But man, if you're going to be a master, if the goal is to be a master, I would say explore all branches. And so, that's the first slice. I think that it's important to, even if you're focused exclusively on just being a jiu-jitsu competitor, it would only take you like a couple months of focusing on like clinch and distance control and how to do simple takedowns that don't cause you to hurt yourself if you're taking the fight to the ground on concrete or something. It's just minor adjustments and it just enriches your own knowledge. And then of course, what matters more, protecting yourself while you're being attacked in a street situation or winning a medal at a tournament? I would say that winning a medal is great, but dude, not getting hospitalized is probably better. Right. So, so it's good to know both. The second part of your question, I have now forgotten. I apologize. I need more caffeine here. It was, are we floating away from self-defense?
I think that's I think that's the broad question, right? Are we floating away, or Jim's paying attention to that? But I'm going to plug in and add here. Like, do you think we think that is happening, right? We've established that. Do you think that's kind of led to the increased interest? And you know this better than me because you've been training way longer. But the increased interest in no-gi in gyms?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, absolutely. And I actually do remember what I was going to say before. So we were talking about how blue belts now, when I watch a 16-year-old blue belt training, 99.9% of the time, that kid would have absolutely slaughtered me when I was a blue belt in my early 20s. And I think part of the growth of jiu-jitsu, which I do credit to the sport of jiu-jitsu more than anything. Part of that, it has brought along a tremendous amount of structure to the Everyday Academy. So you were asking whether or not self-defense stuff is still being taught in academies and whether or not that's something we're floating away from. It is, but at the same time, on the positive, structure, organization, and teaching methods have by far improved. Like, dude, I remember walking into multiple jiu-jitsu gyms in the early 2000s, both here and in Brazil. And it was just like, dude, you basically are just your chum. It's like, here's a bunch of sharks. Go have fun. Go get murdered. And if you come back tomorrow, you'll learn how to not get murdered the same way eventually. And it really was. It was very reminiscent of boxing gyms. That's one of my complaints. My main complaint about the boxing industry is that there still are not, even in 2026, I don't feel like there's boxing gyms that have a proper like white belt sort of program where like new people are not just punching bags for the people that are intermediate level and above. I feel like jiu-jitsu has structured beginner classes much better. There's structure in curriculums that didn't exist, that was not what it, that is now what it not was before. And that I think has led to less people quitting, more people sticking around, and more people improving. So while we have floated away from the original roots a little bit, as far as it being a self-defense focused thing and more of a martial arts type of thing, we've moved into this sport thing, which, man, as Americans, we are a sporting nation. Yeah. We're coaching and sporting. It's what USA does really well. And that's something that I think that as it's grown in the States, we've applied the same structures that we have to in American football or soccer or baseball or gymnastics programs or wrestling programs. We've taken a lot of these same structures of curriculums and programs and applied them into jiu-jitsu. The other thing that's very obvious as far as jiu-jitsu's overall level rising is the introduction of streaming video. I mean, oh yeah, dude, I remember when I first started competing as a white belt, I think my first tournament was like 2007, something like that, 2006, 2007. It was in Florida. And like, dude, every gym had their secrets and like their specialties and like their things that they did. And it was kind of like they'd protect that. There was no cross training. Like cross training was really looked down upon. And like every gym kind of had their little things. Now everything's out in the open, dude. Any aspect of jiu-jitsu you want to learn, not only can you pick it up on an instructional, you can find footage of competitions at the press of a button. There's nothing out there now that's really a secret in jiu-jitsu anymore. And that's also helped the levels of technique and skill rise the way that it has. So very long, convoluted answer to your question, my friend. But the answer is basically, yes, we floated away from self-defense. At the same time, the sport structure has increased the efficiency of learning, teaching, business structure, and everything in between. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah. I mean, these are even things I see in my early part of my journey. And I think it's something for all academy owners to be aware of. And that's kind of where the fix is, or to make sure it doesn't get out of hand. So, but no, it's good, hearing your perspective on it. So thanks for sharing. Sure. Hope you have a little more time to spend with me. There are a couple sections. Good.
Oh,
good.
Hang out. I got all day, dude. Yeah,
there's a few sections, a couple sections I want to make sure we explore. And, it would be a missed chance if we didn't talk about your time training with, UFC legend Damian Maia. Oh yeah. And you're a black belt under him. And, like how did that opportunity come up? It had to be one of those like life moments, especially in a jiu-jitsu journey. Like if you're like a striking guy and Chuck Liddell says, "Hey, you want to come train with me?" I don't like. Yeah. Like that's kind of how did that come about, man?
Dude, it is still very surreal to me. And I joke about that a lot, actually, is that if you had told Ryan Ford as a white belt that eventually the person tying the black belt around him would be Damian Maia, I would have said you were crazy. And it's interesting how it all happened. So yeah, I started jiu-jitsu in Roswell. I got my purple belt from Eddie Camden, and then I got my brown belt from Paul Creighton. I spent a lot of time. I actually spent more time with Paul Creighton, I think, than anybody. No, yeah, I guess. Well, yeah, I'd have to sit and count the years. But I was with Paul Creighton, who's a black belt under Renzo Gracie, one of the best kept secrets in jiu-jitsu. He's a super humble guy and doesn't do a lot of self-promotion. But anyone that knows if you know, Paul Creighton is the man. Unbelievable person, coach, teacher, and jiu-jitsu skills are just off the charts. So I was real lucky to be a student of his for a long time. My brother's a black belt under him. Chris is a black belt under Paul. So I was at Creighton MMA in outside Atlanta for a while. And what ended up happening was it's kind of interesting. So I first trained with Damian Maia as a blue belt way before I was even at Paul Creighton. So this is back when I was this was 2012. So I went to Brazil. I told you that story about how my mother-in-law gave me coffee and it almost killed me. So that same trip, we were in Sao Paulo. I was in Sao Paulo to propose to my wife and meet her family and stuff. And I told her, I said, "Hey, I obviously, needless to say, I brought my gi with me and my belt and everything, and I want to train in Brazil. It's been like a life bucket list thing to do." but I didn't know anything about jiu-jitsu in Sao Paulo. Like all the jiu-jitsu I'd ever heard of was from Rio. Rio de Janeiro is where all the Gracies were. It's where a lot of the early Vale Tudo stuff came from. All that stuff. So I didn't really know Sao Paulo. So I got on Google and I just said, okay, what like jiu-jitsu in Sao Paulo? And a few academies popped up and then it said Damian Maia. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not like Damian Maia actually has a school in Sao Paulo. And so we looked it up and he did. And I was like, oh my God, that's where we got to go. Like we have to go. And it was on the opposite side of the city. I don't know if you know about Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo is the biggest city in all the Americas. I think it's about 6 Atlantas.
Oh, wow.
And it's 2.5 New York cities. It's real big. Or it's 1.5 New York cities. It's really, really, really big. We're on one side of the city. Damian's is on the other. We took the train. It took us like an hour and a half, 2 hours to get there, but we got there and trained and had a great time. Really cool meeting Damian. He's a very down to earth, cool guy. And then I went back to the States. I was only here for a couple of weeks at that time just to visit my wife's family and stuff. But then every time we came back annually, I would drop in. I would train. So I've trained at Damian's since Blue Belt. He's actually had 3 different schools during all those years. So I was at his first school, his second school, and his school that he has now, always visiting. And so what eventually happened was in 2019, my wife and I got pregnant with our daughter. And she didn't really know any doctors in the States. And she was like, listen, my doctor in Brazil is like a family friend. I've known him since I was a little girl. It would mean a lot to me to just have the baby down there. I know him. It's like, I'll be with family and stuff. And so for me, it's like, well, that's an excuse for me to train jiu-jitsu more down in Brazil. So let's go, So we went down here. My daughter was born. We stayed for a year. I was running the podcast. She was doing her graphic design. And then COVID hit. So we said, okay, well, we should probably head back to Atlanta while this all simmers down. So we left. Then we got pregnant with my son during the pandemic. Less things to do, right? So we got pregnant. And
I was stationed in Kansas, man. That's where
it's like, what are you gonna do with your time, man? Yeah. What else are you gonna do? What else are you gonna do? Yeah. And so we came back and had my son with the doctor again, because it went so well the first time. And my wife was like, look, this time we're only staying for 3 months. We're going to have our son and we go back to Georgia. That was about 6 years ago. So we haven't left. And so naturally Damian's school was kind of always home base as far as jiu-jitsu goes, over the last 12 years that I've been coming down here. And so when we made the decision to stay permanently, I had a talk with Paul Creighton, my teacher back home. And he was like, dude, totally get it. Just, do your thing. And he was happy for me and all that. And then I told Damian, hey, look, if it's okay with you, I'm already a brown belt, but I'd like to, continue earning rank down here. And I plan on staying here for the long haul, it looks like. And so he was like, yeah, great. So he did make me wait about 6 years or so of training with him, which is normal. I think if you're showing up as an advanced rank anywhere, they want to, you got to earn a little bit more. Yeah. Which I think is reasonable. But yeah, after about 5 years about 4.5 years of being here, he tied the black belt around me and the rest is history. So training with Damian's unreal. I mean, it's unreal. We were talking earlier about the levels of coffee and the levels of jiu-jitsu. Needless to say, Damian's like a Jedi among Jedi. And so
it's like Death Wish times 5.
Dude, I almost don't have words. Like, it's kind of funny. Like back at Creighton, when I would train with Paul, there's a handful of guys in the academy that would kick my ass. Of those guys, there was a smaller group that were just like untouchable. Like I could literally do almost nothing. Paul would roll with them and they could do nothing to Paul. Then Paul would talk about rolling with Renzo Gracie and how he can do nothing to Renzo. So it's just like, so there's these levels and levels and levels. And then, so it's kind of the same thing with Damian. Like there's guys that murder me in training here that Damian can literally like almost sip coffee and just like triangle these guys and stuff, not even like no effort almost. And then there's also like, I won't name names, but there's very recognizable names that come through our academy all the time. We just had Terere was just here. He's an old school guy. Buchecha was just here. Now I'm not talking about those two, but there are other names I won't name that come in to train with us, and Damian just makes them look like white belts. It's just like, do you know who that guy even is? You know what I mean? Like, Damian just like, and the guy, of course, is just sitting there like what just happened? So there's these levels, and training with Damian has just been, you realize that there are certain levels that probably are not going to be obtainable in my lifetime from here out, but I at least aspire to do the best I can and get as close as I can,
Yeah, and I'm glad we've taken time to talk about this, because I mean, this is life changing. I mean, you moved to Brazil,
Yeah.
right? And this is a huge part of why. And
Yeah.
That's a big commitment, and I think it's encouraging to hear, like, how you feel, especially as a black belt now, right? It's developing your game, I would imagine, even further, right? And giving you the opportunity to learn jiu-jitsu through different lens, and you probably would never, I mean,
Sure.
when you're training at like Alliance or a Creighton gym, I mean, you're exposed to some amazing jiu-jitsu.
Oh God, yeah,
I mean, it's just
unbelievable.
It's
like anybody I trained with,
right?
Oh yeah, dude. Anybody I trained, like all the tough guys at Alliance in Atlanta or at Paul Creighton's, if they came to Damian's, they'd fit right in. There's certain levels where when you're the upper echelon of the room, like you'd fit in most places. But then there's the Jedis, like your Paul Creighton's and your Damian Maias and your people above all them. But but you're right. It's been very, very cool. There's an interesting phase I'm in right now where at 41, I'm just coming off of being out of jiu-jitsu for about 10 months due to a neck injury I had.
Yeah.
And so I've had to kind of reevaluate how I play jiu-jitsu now. It's my neck's back to 100%, thank God. But I've lost all the curvature of my neck just from years of almost 20 years of jiu-jitsu. My neck is basically a straight line. They call it military neck. I was never in the military, but I got it through jiu-jitsu. Just constant cross faces, I guess, getting smashed. So I have no curvature in my neck. And so I'm more prone to herniated discs now as a result of that. All my discs just kind of sit on top of each other without any curvature. And so my game for a long time, I've been very much an inverted guard. I use a lot of inversions, both to recompose and retain guard, but also to attack leg locks and things like that. I'm hitting the point now where I have to kind of second guess whether I can invert. I have to pick and choose who I invert with. If someone's, I'm about 100. I'm actually at my lowest weight I've ever been in as an adult. I'm about 160 pounds right now. But if I'm rolling with a guy over 200 pounds, I'm probably not a good idea to stack on my neck and invert to prevent. Just let him pass and try to escape and get back to half guard or something. So I'm kind of at a point now where I'm reevaluating. I've spent 20 years building a certain game, and now it's kind of like, okay, now we need to readjust. So I'm exploring things that are not my A game anymore, which at the end of the day, I think is good for me. But
so the game that I see, so I went in and watched the documentary you made on YouTube, The Saint of Crackling, which was amazing, by the way.
Thanks,
so the inverting and the rolling that we see in the clips there, it's a little different than the Ryan Ford on the mat now, right? Because I was like, Jesus,
of how
like
I get
6
my
inversions like this guy did. Like as soon as somebody passed this invert roll away, I'm like, I could never pass this guy.
You watch me rolling in that documentary, and you'll see why I've got herniated discs in my neck. Now, there's a time and a place. Obviously, there's a way to do it safely and smart and intelligently, and then and I just have to lean more into that now. I have to be a little more selective. But I'm glad you liked the documentary, man. That was one of the coolest experiences of my whole jiu-jitsu journey.
Man, it was powerful. I loved it.
Unreal.
It was and that's exactly, the heart of this podcast is like how jiu-jitsu can, like, those kids and those people in that area, man. I mean, there's like no chance unless there's programs like that, right? So.
That's been a huge eye opener. Just living outside the States is that I'm not saying poverty doesn't exist in the U.S. because poverty exists everywhere, but I do feel like there are certain levels of poverty, and when you leave the U.S., which does have a lot of safety nets for people and opportunities, even if you're at the bottom, you can often get yourself to a comfortable place through help or through effort. Some countries that's not really a thing. There's not the same social assistance programs. There's not the same level of like homeless shelters. There's not the same level of food drives. And so when you're down and out in some places, it's a different definition of down and out. And so being in that place, for the listeners that don't know what we're talking about, the documentary I came to Sao Paulo. A guy that listens to the podcast reached out to me and said, "Hey man, I'm here in Sao Paulo. I've got a social program, and I'd really like you to check it out." So social programs are a thing in Brazil. They have it for every sport. They even have it for like ballet and like art. where a person can start a social outreach program for kids, and the government will give them like a stipend, like a monthly or a annual stipend to help support it. And jiu-jitsu is a big avenue of that. So this guy has a kids jiu-jitsu program, and it happens to be located in like the absolute worst area of Sao Paulo. It's called Cracolândia, which translates to crackland. And it looks, you'll see if you watch the documentary is called The Saint of Crackland. And it's a pretty rough area, I mean, to say the least. And this guy goes down there with his mats and gets kids off the street training jiu-jitsu and gets them in a safer place and helps them in a lot of ways. So it's very, very eye-opening. But yeah, man, it was definitely one of the coolest experiences I've had. And along the way is seeing that impact he's doing, you know?
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, that's even stuff that like I could see happen in some of the areas here in the U.S. I mean, some of these major metros, you know.
Sure.
I know, you know, states like Louisiana and even here in Georgia, right? There's areas, maybe not nearly as extreme.
Yeah.
But like my point, what I'm trying to say is like utilizing martial arts and jiu-jitsu and stuff like that in that capacity of you know, getting people involved in, especially kids. I have a heart for kids. You know, I love teaching the kids at Caleb's, you know, working, and it's just been so impactful. So that's really cool. Love the documentary. And one of the last sections though here, as we start to wrap up, I want to talk about your last guest, I believe, was Damian, right? I think he was your last guest. And one of the things that you talked about, one of the subjects you both covered during that episode is how jiu-jitsu teaches you to learn. And this is something that's been noticeable in my journey because my mind kind of works in that step-by-step process. Yeah. You know, talk to me a little bit about, you know, the positive benefits and the impact that, you know, learning jiu-jitsu has had on your life and others. I know you play music. You mentioned there in that podcast and several others episodes that you're learning the guitar. Finally, you're buckling down. Yeah. And I hope you can. Yeah. I see it in the background. I hope you can play at least "Stairway to Heaven" on it. I mean,
no. Now, if anyone out there has a band and they're looking for a really mediocre guitarist, I'm your guy. I'm trying, dude. I've been trying to learn guitar. I jokingly say I've been trying to learn guitar for like 30 years. And what happened with me. And this will answer your question. So learning jujitsu has taught me how to learn everything else. Mm-hmm. And so 30 years ago, when I was like 10 years old, I wanted to learn guitar. And my dad, for Christmas one year got me, it wasn't a Marshall. It was actually maybe it was a Marshall. I can't remember. Anyway, he got me a guitar. And I played it for about a week, and then it collected dust, and I think we eventually sold it off. It was the problem I had growing up, and even as a young adult, was that I didn't understand how to properly learn things. I would, for example, with guitar, I wanted to just start shredding. I want to play like Dimebag Darrell or you know, Kirk Hammett. Yeah. I want to just start shredding, dude. I mean, forget these like I don't want to play like Hot Cross the Buns and like, you know, learn chords. That's lame. You know, I want to shred. And what I didn't understand was that you can't shred or do anything cool until you learn the very basics and learn the fundamentals and structure it and practice it and repeat it a lot. And so jiu-jitsu is the first thing in my life that I've really done that I've stuck with long enough to understand the process of going through fundamentals, basics, repetition, muscle memory, improving techniques, finding your own rhythm, finding your own techniques, finding your own specialties, and then going from there. So jiu-jitsu has kind of forced me and my weaponized ADD to focus on proper structure of learning anything. And I realize now that as I'm learning guitar much later in life, that, okay, cool. I need to, these things I'm doing, it's not that I need to just learn how to play one song after another and try to memorize exactly where to touch to play the song. I need to understand tone. I need to understand chords. I need to understand notes. I need to understand transitions with my fingers. I need to warm my fingers up. I need to understand how to play patterns and scales. And then in doing that, I've just been able to apply that to pretty much everything else I try to learn now. I try to look at it through the lens of starting with fundamentals, repeating those over and over again, learning to appreciate that and not just be bored with it. And it's one of those things that I'm able to apply to kind of everything now as I've become a black belt,
I think that's one of the things I appreciate training at Alliance the most as a white belt is just how structured it was and learning jujitsu in that way, right? Like I said, at Caleb's, and this is no dig whatsoever on Iron Wolf or Caleb. They're phenomenal. But like, I didn't know how to like grip a gi, and just a very structured way of learning jujitsu, and that's 100%. I think the success in learning anything new is structured and thinking about all the little things you have to do to get to the big things.
Yes.
I thought that was an amazing part of your episode with Damian when you started talking about that. So, well, Ryan, we're here at an hour and some change in, and I really appreciate you coming on, and
of course,
and like I said, I fanboyed out a little bit before we hit record, but I don't mind fanboying out now, man. I love listening to everything that you do. The BJJ Fanatics podcast. Every guest you bring on brings something new to me as a podcaster, and and I think if all of us jiu-jitsu podcasters are being honest, there's a golden standard, right? And I think you're probably that gold standard that we all want to, kind of rise to, right? And we're going to leave out Joe Rogan because, he does BJJ, but we know he's not a BJJ guy or a podcast guy. So,
yeah.
But man, we just appreciate everything that you do and have done. And just to thank you, man.
Well, Joe, that really sincerely means a lot, buddy. Thank you very much for the kind words. And I hope you take this podcast as far as it can possibly go, and happy to lend insight however I can. And I really do appreciate you inviting me to be here. It was really a pleasure.
Yeah. Outstanding, man. And for those of you who want to connect with Ryan, Instagram, and again, if you're a jiu-jitsu guy, you know where to find him because he's a BJJ Fanatics podcast. Anything else you want to shout out or call out, Ryan, before we end?
No, just my Instagram's at Gringo Ryan. If you guys are ever coming through Sao Paulo, I encourage you to check out Damian Maia's Academy. I'm there all the time, so drop in and train with us. And that's about it. Check out the BJJ Fanatics podcast.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Ryan. Appreciate you being here.
Of course, brother. Thank you.